All right, hey, welcome to What If Geeks. I'm John,
Hey, I'm Paul.
and we're going to see how this works. So, this is episode one, and we're basically just going to take this to introduce ourselves. Uh,
Yeah, this is like episode one, our origin stories, right? Every superhero has a good origin story, so this is ours.
yeah, yeah. So, this is going to be a lot of fun because, well, like some superheroes, they don't quite get it right the first time. It's taken us a few times. So, we're basically just going to kind of like walk through why we wanted to do this. So I guess the first thing is why we got into the geek culture.
Yeah.
So we can start with. You want to start? Go ahead.
Sure. Hey, I'm Paul. I am a middle-aged nerd dad. I am married with a couple kids. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Moved to Florida when I was 12. To South Florida specifically. Went to the University of Florida. Messed around for a couple years. Finally graduated. Figured out that you could do politics as a living. So moved to Central Florida, which is where we are right now, beautiful Central Florida, and did political campaigns for a living. And now I am a government affairs professional. I'm a lobbyist for a travel company, and but I have always been into comics. I have long boards full of long boxes full of comics and boards and bags, and you have to get gloves out and be all nerdy and stuff as you touch them. My son has seen them. He's 7. He's seen them, but he's not allowed to touch them. In some ways, I'm that guy. But I have always been into comics. My favorite heroes are DC, Superman, Batman. But I have as many Marvel comics, I think, as I have DC comics. Not sure what it is about DC that they have the better heroes, at least in terms of my favorites. But that's kind of where I am. Been into sci-fi as much, Star Wars. But once I got married and had kids, I've not seen some of the animated movies or animated shows. Not read the fan fiction, so I guess there are some listening that are like, "You're not really into this if you don't know every piece of fan fiction and you don't know anything about Mace Windu and any of those guys." So for some of you, I am a total piker, and for some, I am the nerdiest person you've ever heard of.
And actually, that's why I think we get along so well because we're like opposites of the same coin. We both love all this stuff, but where Paul boxes and bags all his comics, I read them and I don't worry about them, and I drive him crazy. Yeah, he has a little panic attack every time he walks in my house. But same deal. I guess we should have gotten that out of the way ahead of time. We are both middle-aged men uh, who happen to have young kids, so right off the bat, I will freely admit I'm stupid. You should not listen to anything I say, but if you do, we're going to have a great time talking about this stuff.
That's awesome.
We've grown up in this culture and we love it, and that's why we're doing this show. I grew up in Staten Island, New York, and then I joined the Navy, and I spent 20 years in the Navy going all over the world. Retired, came down to Orlando, met Paul. Our families got along great. Our boys play football together, and we've just been together ever since. And throughout my entire life, geek culture, sci-fi, Star Wars, superheroes, horror, all that has been my main go-to. So it's something that I love and I want to talk about with all of you. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that.
Awesome.
So I guess... okay, I'll keep going because, well, I'm just stupid.
And I grabbed a beer and took a drink. Yeah. So I took a long swallow, so John had to fill.
That didn't help. All right, so contrast. My English is great only when I'm fighting with my wife. Contrary to Paul, where he loved DC growing up and he kind of liked Marvel, I loved Marvel growing up and I kind of liked DC. I got introed to DC through some of my friends, so I love it. We'll go back and forth throughout this podcast on those two a lot. But I think something, and we'll touch on this later on, but what you said about you didn't know I guess why the DC always spoke to you.
Yeah.
I think the DC heroes were written to be heroes. Like, they were written to be gods.
Yep.
And the Marvel heroes were written to be mere people who grew to be, extra, whatever. And I think that's something that was there. It was kind of why that spoke to me.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because having read a couple things about the history of DC Comics and Marvel Comics, if you think about when they were formed, DC, those heroes, Superman came out in the early 30s, Batman in the later 30s. They were really much more based on, philosophy and things like Nietzsche's Übermensch is kind of the basis of Superman, and that's even kind of the translation of that is to Superman. And so you think about what they were into in the 20s. You're right, they were much more sort of larger than life superheroes. I mean, that's obviously what they are, but they were, yes, they were larger than life. They were these mythical based kind of ideals. Marvel comes along later on and is maybe early 60s, a little more counterculture. They dealt with different issues, right? You look at Spider-Man, and he struggles as a kid to kind of figure out, how do I use these powers? How do I make this relate into my world? And Peter Parker has to learn that lesson about, right, with great power comes great responsibility.
The X-Men were an allegory for racism.
Right.
Yeah.
There was none of that in Superman. Superman never sort of sat around and pondered, like, what do I do with this great power? He just did it, right? He just fought bad guys. There was none of that, like, soul-searching among the DC heroes. The thing for me was in Batman, it's the closest thing you could realistically do, right? It was hard for me as a kid to think, man, it'd be cool to be an alien from another planet who's, nothing can hurt you.
You got
right?
everything. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I can't. If you get bitten by a radioactive spider, all you're going to get is cancer and die. Right. You're not going to get powers. If you're struck by lightning in front of a wall of chemicals, you're not going to get super speed. You're going to burn.
Right.
And so it was harder for me to think about, getting these great powers. It was easier to think about, well, if you just really trained really hard, you could maybe be Batman. Now, granted, the way they write Batman is, Batman can get kicked through a brick wall and be okay, right? None of that. Sure. You suspend all the disbelief. But in terms of sort of wish fulfillment as a kid, the closest thing you have to that is Batman. And so that for me that's what is the most identifiable to me. The others are great sort of, as you talked about, mythology, and man, it'd be great to, what could I do if I could, run at super speeds or fly or any of that stuff. So,
well, and the thing that always made me laugh was the difference between the two. It always nagged at me up until was it the 90s when they did the JLA and Avengers? Because they did it repeatedly.
Yep.
And then they finally broke down and they did the amalgam.
Yes.
Amalgam, right?
Yep.
In the 90s.
Yep.
When they did that fight, that's exactly what they keyed on. Was the Avengers had this problem with, like, okay, the DC heroes said, like, they looked at the DC heroes like, you're above all the people and you don't look at them like people.
Yeah.
And DC was like, you guys have all this ability. Why don't you do this? And that was their big conflict through that whole thing. So it was funny for them to kind of get meta with that.
Yeah.
And like really like go at each other like that. And it was cool. It came out, there was a lot of cool stuff in the 90s. So which is kind of bringing us back to, well, basically our relationship together and our ability to talk about this stuff this is all the stuff that we grew up with. And the key to this whole show that we're going to try to do is when we grew up a while ago, a long while ago, none of this stuff was cool at all. And now it's like mainstream.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do here and to let you guys all in behind the curtain was like I started all this garbage, and we'll talk about this later, and then I kind of dragged Paul with me, and he's got the background, and he was like, yeah, I was already thinking, I was doing this too, so let's go. So we kind of like ran into it together after that. I find it really cool that when we grew up, none of this stuff was good. And you just got picked on for it. And now it's just amazing from our standpoint how cool this stuff is now. And it's so mainstream. And that's kind of where we're coming from now. So when we get some other people to kind of come sit down with us, maybe we'll try to get some younger people in with us and get their view on it so we can see how they see it.
To the extent that there were comic book stores when I was in high school, that it was just kind of starting that you would have a comic book store in your neighborhood, in the shopping center or the mini mall somewhere near you. But I walked into it and I was like, please don't let anybody see me walk into this place. I'm going in here the way you go into like the adult video store back in the day, right? Like, remember when there was a video store? For some of you, those words that I said make absolutely no sense, but before Blockbuster and every neighborhood had the kind of, you rented videos from a mom and pop video store. There was either that room in the back for adults only, or if you lived in a big enough city and there was the quote unquote adult bookstore, you'd see people walk in there like kind of with their jackets up, right, so no one sees me. That's how you walked into a comic book store when I was in high school. You're like, don't let any of the cool kids see me walk into this place. You got in there and you were accepted. It was cool because there were other nerds in there. And once you got in there, it was fine. But walking in or walking out, you're like, God, don't let anybody see me coming in.
Yeah, you had the eyes wide shut, Fidelio.
Right. And you took them home, right? And you took them home and then you read them. But you certainly wouldn't bring them to school, not unless you wanted your ass kicked and your comics all over the place. You didn't talk about... I had a friend I remember in 8th grade who used to try to talk to me about, like, we would play Dungeons and Dragons, but he would try to talk to me about it and go, shh. The cool kids will hear you. The football players will hear you. Shut up. And now now you do it. You could run that game in the cafeteria, and some of the cool kids might play with you. There's far less of a stigma to it now than there used to be.
Oh yeah. Well, some of the podcasts I listen to now, like one guy I listen to, he runs a whole Dungeons and Dragons. Like that's his job.
Yeah.
His job is to run that. So really, which growing up, I would have never thought that was a job.
Right.
But yeah, this has definitely been something that got me through a lot in life. So I want to really, this whole thing stemmed out of me hanging out with guys like Paul and, friends growing up. Well, we would just talk about this stuff, hanging out, have a beer, talk. And I'd be like, you know what? Half of the people I listen to on podcasts or whatever, this is all we do. If we just put up a microphone, just start recording, we have a show. So Paul and I finally said, you know what? Let's just try it. So we're going to see.
Yeah.
So then a lot of this is going to be like a back and forth. Right now, unfortunately, between the two of us, we cannot afford to just do this on our own. So we're going to do it as a hobby. As we grow fans, we're going to communicate back and forth. We're going to be all over all the social media. We're going to try to do whatever we can to talk to you guys. You interact with us, we'll interact with you. You let us know what you want to hear, and we'll provide. We'll work. We'll talk. It's basically kind of an open door. We're really an open door here. We just kind of want to get our voice out there because we're bored. We might be having a midlife crisis. We're not sure.
Yeah, this is easier than getting a Corvette or a girlfriend. Girlfriends are expensive.
It's a lot cheaper. Yeah, yeah. I can't afford a third divorce.
Right. I don't need a Corvette. My penis works.
There you go. Nice. Mine barely. There. Okay, so there you go. So now you guys all know that nothing is.
Now we have to have the explicit thing on the podcast. We done messed up now.
No, it's all right. Nothing is off the table. Right. So there you go.
That's awesome.
All right. I think we're going to hold off for a second so we can figure out what we're going to talk about.
We're going to take a break.
We're going to take a break.
Be right back.
And we're back. Sorry. Some of us are old and we have small bladders.
We're both old and we both have small bladders. And now that we're having beers, there's going to be constant interruptions to go to the bathroom. Sorry about that. It's a little slice of life. Pull the curtain back and reveal.
Yes, but now if you want to have fun, we can later on, maybe we'll get like a bell sound or something every time one of us cracks open a beer.
Right.
And you guys can just drink along with us.
Right.
Because that's what this podcast is going to be, is just two old geeks drinking and talking about dumb stuff for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, that'll be our tagline. What if two middle-aged nerd dads sat around drinking beer talking about comics, sci-fi, and video games? What would that sound like? It would sound like this.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And hopefully, at some point, some of you will actually listen to us. That'd be great. So, all right. So, speaking of cartoons and video games, and that's our next topic would be. Let's go with cartoons.
Let's do it. And so I was having this conversation with my wife yesterday. Everything from when we were kids / teenagers is better than it is today, and that includes cartoons were better. Everything from G.I. Joe, the Transformers, Thundercats. Thundercats? Transformers better now or better then?
See, all right. And caveat to what we should have done. This is what you get when you get two amateur guys just trying to wing this. We should have said in the beginning, everything that we talk about now is going to be expanded upon in future episodes because this is episode like 0/1. So everything we talk about now, we're going to really delve into later. So, okay, go ahead. Cartoons.
G.I. Joe better then than now. The original Thundercats, I think, was slightly better than the newish Thundercats that were 13, 14. It came back on Cartoon Network. I think the originals were a little bit... They improved on a couple things. But I think the original still stands. Original G.I. Joe, some of the best.
We're going to time out for a second.
All right.
Go back to Thundercats.
Yeah.
So you have not seen the trailer for the Thundercats Ho?
What is that?
We're going to go into this later. No. Just no.
No?
It's like they basically like took Thundercats and Teen Titans Go.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, now again, mind you, this is coming from, I really found a lot of humor in Teen Titans, but I saw that trailer for Thundercats and holy shit. Ooh.
Good or bad?
No.
Oh,
I appreciated the last incarnation.
That was pretty good.
So much, yeah.
Pretty good.
And this trailer made me appreciate that a whole lot more.
I liked how they did in this relatively new one, 2012, 2013, 2014, something like that. They made Lion-O and Tigra brothers. I think Tiger was adopted, so they made him sort of half brother, step brother, something like that.
Yeah,
so that dynamic was pretty good. There was kind of a love triangle with Chitara that was interesting.
And that was one of those where I watched like a couple episodes. I kept meaning to go back to it, and it was like in my wheelhouse, but I never really watched it.
Yeah.
So to this day, hey, here, give me about a month, and we'll sit down and we'll do a walkthrough.
Right. we'll binge watch them together. And then there was the Wile E. Kit and Kat were like really orphan kind of street urchins that.
Yes.
So that was cool. So some of that was better than the originals, but overall, I still think the originals were cooler. all of those, though, the He-Man, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, they all at the end had that, lesson at the end that one of the characters had to come back and tell you about, hey, don't forget that,
The more you know.
Right, exactly. Right.
Yeah. And you know what? As far as, all right, maybe Thundercats, I appreciated that one that we were just talking about more. But the G.I. Joe, the first one that we grew up with in the 80s, I don't think they've touched that. I know there's been at least one try at it.
Yep.
And the movies, well, we're not going to talk about that. But we will, apparently.
Yeah.
But we're going to say why. But the cartoon was decent. And we'll get into, the fact of these cartoons that had these toys attached to them, too. All right. So the cartoon, though, the 80s cartoon, I think that one, holds true.
Yeah.
Thundercats, I grew up with the first one, but I liked the second one too.
Yeah.
And then, what was the last one you said?
Transformers.
Transformers.
And I struck a nerve.
Well, no, only because of Michael Bay. But but we're going to talk about that too because Bumblebee looks like amazing. The Generation 1 Transformers in the 80s, that was it. And it was really cool.
Yeah.
And it just that created an entire thing. And we're going to get really deep into that later on because there's so much we can delve into with where it came from, depending on how much homework we really want to do. Because this is only a half-assed effort. So we're going to see how deep we get into it. And we'll joke about that with you guys later on too. Because really, this is really a half-assed thing. Like I said, I'm stupid. But I can argue Transformers and where GoBots went wrong, and that's about it. But then
I forgot about the cheap knockoff GoBots.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, see, the little things I have little things in my head that I can pop in there.
Blocked it.
But He-Man. All right, the He-Man. Do you remember the remake where suddenly he and Skeletor were suddenly in space?
No.
And He-Man had a ponytail. Yeah. Oh, okay, fine. You know what? Oh, and by the way,
it's better than the bob. He had a bob. What's funny is my wife last night. My wife and I were.
How could you not tell?
Yeah. We're watching. She was trying to find Christmas specials on YouTube, and so one of the things we watched for 30 minutes was a He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special, where it starts off and Orko steals some ship, and he somehow gets transported to Earth in late December, and he suddenly realizes there's Christmas, and they tell him about Santa Claus, and so as part of it, He-Man and She-Ra were together
because their mother came from Earth.
Yeah, and so we were, and I had forgotten that part, and we were talking about that cartoon, and she was like. I was like, I watched He-Man, but it came out, I was in middle school or early high school, and so it didn't, I kind of watched He-Man, but when She-Ra came out, I was like, no, I'm not watching She-Ra. That was sort of where I drew the line of a cartoon I'm not watching. I'm not watching sort of underpowered He-Man, female alternative where
suddenly... And that's exactly what it was. If you actually watched the cartoon, they literally took, everybody in He-Man was, I spiked. Everybody in He-Man was male except for Teela.
Right.
She-Ra, everybody was female except for Bo.
Yeah. They were like, what do we do? How do we sell these toys to
welcome.
Girls?
That shows you how much of a freaking geek I am.
They're
I know all of them.
Okay, we have He-Man, and he has Battle Cat. All right, we'll give her a flying unicorn pony with wings, with rainbow things. And then... your sort of number one was and so everyone's got the female sort of counterpart to Man-at-Arms and everybody else. And I was not.
The only thing to come cool out of that was Hordak. Because Hordak was actually supposed to be in charge of Skeletor in that whole thing. And then they branched him off into She-Ra or whatever. I don't know. And there's times I could be wrong about that too. So who knows? Whatever.
So we're talking about...
Somebody will correct me, I'm sure.
So we got onto 80s. So my wife and I started talking about 80s cartoons yesterday. And talking about how much better they are. There was I think they tried to remake He-Man, but I haven't really seen it.
Okay.
Other than the terrible Dolph Lundgren movie.
All right. To sideline this, at some point, I've been trying to talk Paul into doing some YouTube stuff too. That I will talk about all of this later on. I have an entire dream for how we're going to work this entire network. Some of this will eventually wind up on YouTube. We'll sit down, we'll record. When I can get visual aids like what we're talking about right now, and I can show him, here's what you're missing, and then you can see his reaction on YouTube. That's when I'm going to do that. So we're going to, because right now, this is best. We're going to work on our schedule here, and like my mother told me, I have a face for radio, so we're going to work here. But when you see, I'm going to save that. When we're going to talk He-Man, and we're going to make that. I'm going to make sure that happens when we do a YouTube thing, and I'm going to show you the He-Man remake.
Awesome.
And I'm going to apologize now.
To your thing earlier, Transformers may be the only place where the live action movie, is as good as the cartoon. The first G.I. Joe, terrible. Dolph Lundgren He-Man, really not good. What else? They haven't made a live action Thundercats, although they talked about it.
They've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah.
Again, don't go on YouTube.
They made a live action. Did you ever watch Battle of the Planets?
Brad Pitt is like Tiger.
Did you ever watch Battle of the Planets? You remember Battle of the Planets?
Yeah, it was something else too.
Mark, Jason, Keop,
yeah.
Tiny, yeah. And then they called it something else at some point. And
Mm-hmm.
then they made a live action in like Japan, I think, and it never came out in the States. I think I saw it on YouTube or some bootleg version. Sorry, FBI, if you're listening, I watched some bootleg version. But you don't know where I live.
It's okay. I watch a lot of bootleg.
They know I live in Central Florida. Sorry,
okay.
FBI.
It's okay. Come find me.
Yeah. So I watched that version. It's really not that great. But Transformers is the only one that's been the first Transformers movie is really good.
The first. Okay,
Yeah,
there you go. All right, see? Yeah, now see.
But you're right, Bumblebee looks awesome.
Yes, the first Transformers really, I thought they knocked it out of the park, and then after that, I think personally, Michael Bay just ran with Michael Bay, and I get it, and I do try to look at everything, not from the, I guess the general consensus of Michael Bay just does explosions and J.J. Abrams just does lens flares and whatever. I tried that. However, some of the arguments that I've seen online with like the Transformers, Decepticons are just indiscriminate gray. Yeah, okay, you're right. I don't know. I don't know what we're looking at anymore. So I get that argument.
Right.
When they dropped the Bumblebee trailer, because one thing I heard for a while was, and it got me too, every Transformers trailer got me excited.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then I sat down.
Yeah.
To this day, I have not seen the last one. I will not see it.
Oh, Dark of the Moon? I haven't seen it either.
No. There's another one since then.
Oh.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Right.
There's me and Paul. Just so I know there's another one and he doesn't, that shows you where we're at.
Yep.
It was First Night. Or whatever.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's when
yeah. Apparently they dropped
Odin becomes
Shia. That's when they stopped with Shia LaBeouf.
Shia LaBeouf
right?
is not there.
Yeah.
Mark
Wahlberg
has been there for two
right.
movies,
That's right.
and Odin comes in from Marvel, and now what's his name? The actor Hopkins.
Yeah, Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, he shows up and he's in there somewhere.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's in there.
Is it an Odin cameo?
No. He's there.
Oh, wow.
There's some time travel in there. That's
right.
all I'm gonna say.
Crazy.
That I know from the trailer, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm done. I literally tapped out at the trailer.
Yeah.
That was the first trailer that I was like, you know what? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 6 times.
Fool me 6 times, screw you, Michael Bay.
Yeah. So now they got Bumblebee.
Yeah.
And damn it. They didn't do it again.
They got me.
Oh, as soon as he transformed, I was like, oh my God, it's Bumblebee from the 80s. And then you see Starscream. Starscream shows up, and I'm like, oh my God, it's him.
It's going to be great.
I always go into these things. Here, write this down. I go into these things praying that they do well because I never wish bad on anybody.
Yeah.
I also go into them knowing I may be disappointed. That's all I can say. I am the ultimate 80s geek at heart. Because now, okay, we'll rewind back to when Paul and I were growing up and we had the original Fantastic Four movie.
That one. There's an original, there's a Captain America movie from the late 70s, early 80s where he wears a motorcycle helmet through the whole thing. Yeah, there's a pretty terrible one.
He puts the shield in the front.
Yeah, the front of the motorcycle. Yeah. That was the weird part. There's also the only other the original TV Batman was a movie.
Yeah,
I think they made it into a movie.
Bat Shark Repellent.
Yes, Bat Shark. Yeah, Bat Surf Trunks. Dance the Bat Tootsie. That whole thing.
You can't get rid of a bomb.
Yes.
You know what?
He ran it. He held it in his arms and ran it.
Yeah, we've already talked about penises on here, so you know what? Fuck all of you. You can't get rid of a bomb is going to be our new mantra in this damn podcast.
Yeah. That's the thing that
every time we fuck up, you can't get rid of a bomb.
That almost destroyed Batman as a character. There's a really good book, and this is so I read books about comic books. That's how big a nerd I am. There's a really good book called The Cape Crusade by Glenn Weldon, something like that. And he talks about how that 60s show made Batman such a laughingstock and so different than the original vision that Bob Kane had for the comic that it almost destroyed him. No one was going to take him seriously. And from the end of the TV show until they made the Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson Batman, no one wanted to touch Batman. No TV show, no.
Yep.
The only other time was the Super Friends Batman.
Right, yeah,
right,
cartoon, yeah.
Right, where they was you got it, chum.
Mm-hmm.
That it took the Frank Miller sort of Dark Knight to resuscitate the character. Yeah, that thing almost killed him.
And it was funny, too, because now, for me, I don't know about for you, but for me, at the time when I got into superheroes, that Batman, the Adam West Batman, was really the first thing I can almost remember. That and the Electric Company.
Yes.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
We found that on YouTube.
We'll delve in deep.
I was telling Gail about my wife, Gail. I was telling her about that, and she was like, "I'd never heard of that before." And so we looked it up on YouTube, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a lot worse than I remember it being."
Yeah. Oh, most things are.
Yeah.
Most things are. Which just explains why I've been married 3 times.
And
I don't remember this.
And the 70s Japanese Spider-Man movies. Did you ever seen any of those?
Oh my God! Yes.
Where he's got the big metal things on his wrists that shoot the web, and then he's got that big, and inexplicably he's got a dirt bike and then a giant kind of mecha robot.
Yeah. Which
he jumped
they incorporated recently into the Spider-Verse, which is amazing. We'll get on that later.
Yeah.
We'll get into Spider-Man because we both love Spider-Man. So we went off on another tangent.
Yeah, how do we get here?
We are going to go a lot it's kind of going to be one of those John Madden, he was here and then boom, he's over here.
He's over there.
Yeah, it's going to be both of us. We're going to go on tangents a lot. So unfortunately for you, it's my job right now to try to keep all this in track. So I'm going to get better at that later.
Oh, the thing we haven't talked about is video games.
Video games. All right, yeah, video games. So I'll start with this one. Video games have like described my whole life. To kind of sum it up, like right now, like our sons are 7, and they're kind of into video games a little bit, and my wife worries about my son playing video games, and I'm like, well, as long as he is active, because that's how I grew up with him.
Yep.
And he is like we said, they both play football together, and the two of them run around either together or alone, whatever. They run around a lot, so I don't worry about him. 9 times out of 10, he'll play Fortnite or something, and then be like, I'm going to go play this in real life. And he'd be like, with his Nerf guns out in the yard and playing. So, and that's how I grew up. When we grew up in the 80s, I started off with Pong.
Yep.
And then we went to, so for me, I had Pong and then Atari 2600.
I loved the Atari 2600.
We're going to sidebar in a second. Remember that. So Pong, Atari 2600. I did ColecoVision. Yep. I never had the Intellivision, but a friend of mine had it. So we played some games.
Me too. I didn't have one, but a buddy of mine had one. Yeah. So yeah.
And then I jumped over to, after that, there was a space in there, and then I got the Nintendo.
Yep.
So once Nintendo hit, I was Nintendo, Super Nintendo,
right.
Genesis.
Yeah.
I got my notes. I'm going to look. I got a whole bunch of this crap. Nope, that's the wrong notes. What I said, Genesis. I had both Segas. I had the original Sega and the Genesis. I had the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, the original PlayStation 2, and then we got into the Xbox and the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
And that was around the time, once I had the 360, we were playing online and doing whatever, and then that's about the time Noah was born, and I stopped collecting stuff because I was like, I might want to adult at about 40.
Right.
Yeah. How about you?
I had Pong. I had the Atari 2600. I had one friend that had ColecoVision. I had one friend that had Intellivision, and so we would trade off, sort of like we'd be at his house and play ColecoVision, and his house and play Intellivision, and then mine and play Atari. Do you remember? And you would remember this because you grew up in New York. Do you remember WPIX?
Yeah,
the television show.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Do you? So I grew up. We lived in Pittsburgh, as I mentioned earlier, but before we moved to Florida. We lived in New Jersey. We lived in Cherry Hill in South Jersey. But New Jersey's not that big. So some of our TV stations were Philly, but some were New York. And so WPIX would do this contest, and they would have kids playing, like they were playing in television on the screen, and the kid would say picks when he wanted to fire. And if you got a certain score, like you won something. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
It was crazy WPS. So anyway, ColecoVision television. I had a Nintendo. I had the NES, obviously the original old school NES. I had a Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis was early college for me because I'm older than you. I had a Super Nintendo. I didn't have a Nintendo 64.
Barely, but the old fart jokes are going to come.
And then I graduated from college. I adulted for a little bit, not real. I sort of played at adulting, but I didn't have the original PlayStation. I got a PlayStation 2, and then I got an Xbox 360, and then I got a Wii, which sort of felt retro to me. But I got a Wii, and then at some point, so I still have the Wii, I still have the 360. I don't know what happened to the Genesis. I don't know what happened to the NES. But 2 years ago, my wife got me. Remember when the NES, the one sort of solid thing came out with like 50 built-in games?
Yeah.
And it plugged into your TV?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I read about that thing coming out, and I told my wife about it. And I said I wanted it for whatever the next holiday was. But I didn't realize it wasn't going to come out yet for like another 6 or 8 months. So she got me like an old school Nintendo. She found one somewhere online, and so got that. And then we have this cartridge that has like 60 games built into it. And so I've got all the really cool games, including Tecmo Super Bowl, which is a blast.
Oh, nice.
And so what I've done now is I still have the Xbox 360. I've got the Wii. And so, as you mentioned, our sons are 7. I have set up the Wii and the old Nintendo. And so my son and I play Tecmo Super Bowl. But the game itself is from the late 80s. So the best team is the Niners, right?
Yeah.
It's Joe Montana throwing to Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
Or is it Steve Young? I forget. Anyway.
No, Jackson was in there.
Oh, Bo Jackson.
Raiders,
right. Bo Jackson for the Raiders. Like, you cannot tackle Bo Jackson from the Raiders. Like, it's unstoppable. And so since the Raiders aren't good now, I'll take the Raiders. And he's like, why are you being the Raiders? I'm like, you'll see. But we are Steelers fans because I mentioned I was born in Pittsburgh. So he'll take the Steelers, and they're terrible.
I'm sorry.
And they're the Steelers in that game are terrible. It's Bubby Brister as quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Merrill Hodge is the running. Sorry, Bubby Brister and Merrill Hodge are never going to hear this. But they're really not.
If you do write us,
right? They're really not good. And so we play that. We play the Wii. And what I'd like to do for him is, and now that I have seen, there's a 2600 with a bunch of games built in that plugs into the HDMI in your TV. There's a Sega Genesis the same way. And so what I've thought about doing is sort of ramping him up to getting into an Xbox One or a Switch. Is okay. Here's how video games used to be. Like, if you remember,
yes,
the Atari 2600, when you played the football game, like, there's like 3 guys, right? If too many things appeared on the screen at one time, they flashed.
They all moved.
Yeah, they moved as one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want him to see that. I want him to see what was it? The Haunted House
or
Adventure.
You want to do the same thing I do. Yeah, Adventure.
Yeah.
You want to do
You're
the
a
same
square.
thing I did.
You're a square. And when you have a sword, the thing sticks out. Yeah.
You don't do the same thing I want to do where, like, you look on YouTube and you see, current kids react to whatever. That's what you want.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So, side note, and damn if I don't got to pee again. We're going to pause a second. Side note, both of our kids have YouTube channels, and we'll expand on that later. But I think something coming out of us doing this is, like we talked about, sidebar, if we find emulators for them to play.
Absolutely.
And we play together.
Yeah.
Because I have the equipment to record us playing the games, and we can get the two of them with us sitting there in the game room playing.
Yes.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
So look forward to that. Maybe.
And as you watch people play Fortnite, and the graphics on Fortnite are amazing.
Oh yeah.
And then I want me and Coleman to play like that old football game where the 3 guys flash and move.
Combat.
Yeah, combat. And just watch people go, what are you guys doing? Like, what is that? Yeah.
The video editing on that might take a while, but yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do something like that.
Yeah, but thinking about those to where we are now, like you watch the cutscenes on Red Dead Redemption 2, or the new Fallout game, or any of those things.
All the Call of Duty stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
The fact that I can sit there, again, this is going back to don't tell anybody, but Noah's getting an Xbox One for Christmas.
Nice.
Shh. Because all one of you don't say nothing.
Right.
But so only because he likes the Plants vs. Zombies.
Right.
So Uncle Corey that you've heard about, and you'll hear about Uncle Corey later. And at some point, maybe we'll get him on here if you can understand him.
Cool.
We'll have to get a translator in here because he speaks Alabama.
My wife's from Alabama. I'm an official Alabama translator.
Yeah. Well, okay. Oh, good, because he speaks Alabama like a lisp, so it's really funny.
I speak Alabama,
and I say that with all the love in the world because that's my brother. So
I love you, Alabama, but you do have to get your passport stamped when you cross the border into Alabama.
Yeah. Oh my God. So when he shows up, you're gonna meet him finally, and it's gonna be great. He's buying Noah the Xbox because Noah wants Plants vs. Zombies. And he's like, well, this is how he can get it, so this is what I'm doing. And he's buying all this crap for him. So he's going to have the Xbox. But once we get into that, then we'll start playing around with the other games and stuff. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing if you think about. I mean, it's not all that long ago. This Atari joystick has one friggin' button, one button, and now a controller has like 12. Right? You got 2 triggers. You got these 2 buttons. You got 4 on the thing. You got these other 2. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. And to bring it back to the What If Geeks podcast, our 7-year-olds are running rings around us on like 17 buttons and.
Yeah, I sound like an old man. These controllers, you kids, we had one, when I was a kid, we had one button. One button's enough.
And we were happy with it.
We made use with our one button.
Oh, my God.
Now you kids today with your 12 fancy buttons. We had one button.
All right, so we are going to take one more break, and then we're going to come back and we'll wrap this up. We'll let you know what to expect next, I guess.
Awesome.
Because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'll let Paul write some shit down.
Hey, we're back. Everybody's bladders are empty, and we're feeling good. So this has been a lot of fun. This is what we're considering episode 1. We recorded an episode 0 where we messed around with microphones, and what ended up happening was the audio sounded best by the onboard microphone on John's computer. But now,
welcome to Star Trek.
Right. This has been a blast. You've heard a little bit about us, some of the things we're into, who we are, and I know I've had a good time. I think John has too. And so I know we're looking forward to doing it again. In the future, you'll hear just more about who we are, what we're into, what thoughts on stuff. I hope you've had as much fun as we have. I think that's it. We're going to wrap this one up, and so we'll see you in episode 2. Later.
Yep. I think that's the only thing I've got to add to that is going into What If Geeks, I guess. I was the initial creator for this thing, and like we said earlier, when Paul and I got together and we realized what we wanted to do with this, the big thing was just creating a society to talk, and that's our big thing. We want to be able to sit down with people and talk. So when we have a Facebook page right now, and we're going to add in YouTube and Instagram and all that other garbage as our old minds are letting us learn how to do it. You guys jump in there and you tell us what's up, and we talk. But we want to interact with you, and that's the big thing. We want to just have these conversations because we love having these conversations. That's the whole reason we're doing this. He and I just love talking about this garbage, and we want to get other people involved.
That's right. These past, 40-something minutes have flown by.
Yeah.
And so it's been a blast. I hope you've had a good time too. And so episode 1 in the can, and we'll see you in episode 2.
All right.
Later.
Later.